is Dr. Anjali, who has been a professor at IISc for a very long time and a very well-known name around there. She was in the Department of Biochemistry. She has been trained in tumor biology during her PhD and after her PhD. It would be great if you could just briefly tell us what you did when you were at IISc.
So thank you for the introduction. So in IISc, I'll talk about the projects that my lab has been doing, because I joined IISc first as a postdoctoral fellow. I think I'll leave that. So let me tell you what I have been doing in IISc. So there have been two main research projects in my laboratory. One is on a protein that is called glycodelin, and it is produced or secreted by the endometrium in response to progesterone. So because it's in response to progesterone, it would have some relevance to pregnancy. So we started looking at that, and there was one report which said that this protein it immunosuppresses, or it suppresses the immune system of the mother so that the fetus is not rejected. Because after all, the fetus is a semi-allograft and does express paternal antigens, which can evoke an immune response in the mother, and the mother is capable of rejecting. But there are quite a few molecules. Of course, there are about 10 to 12 different molecules that are in place, which see that though the mother's immune response recognizes the foreign, the semi-allograft fetus, the immune system is kept at bay, so that the mother doesn't suffer from recurrent infections. Yes, yet in the intrauterine compartment, the fetus progresses. So we started looking at this protein, and we were able to, so of course several students have worked on this, one molecule right from purification, characterization. It's a glycosylated protein, so a little bit with respect to also the importance of glycans. We've seen the effect of this protein on almost all the cells of the immune system, both innate as well as acquired. So that is, and what I think the highlight of all of this is, unfortunately it was towards the end of my career there in biochemistry department, that since this protein is able to protect the semi-allograft, we started viewing this protein as a possibility in therapeutics to be able to use in graft versus host reaction in case of transplantation of organs. So that there's only one publication on that, but I hope that it will take off. Somebody would be interested in taking it up.
That is quite a bit of transition from trying to understand how the body works and how you can take it to the bedside for therapeutics.
Yes. So that's been a large chunk of my research projects, and the other one is equally interested, and I think now it's gained a lot of interest because this molecule called Abrin, which is a type 2 ribosome inactivating protein. So just to probably allow people to think of what this could be, it's very similar in structure to the toxin ricin, which is from the plant Ricinus communis. So Abrin it's a plant protein from Abris precatorius. It's a plant that you can see. It's a wild plant. You can see this.
This is like
all
a
the countryside.
Sort of.
Pardon?
This is like a wild plant, right?
Yeah, it's a wild plant.
Yes,
it's a woody climber.
Yes,
So it belongs to Leguminaceae.
Okay.
And it has, so there are these pods which when they open, they release these beautiful red bead-like seeds, which are oval. And the interesting part is that all these seeds are identical. So people were using these seeds in earlier times to weigh against gold, and to weigh gold.
Okay.
So they're so, they have the same weight, and they're beautiful because they're red and there's a black dot. So very attractive. They're also called Jequirity beans.
Okay.
But cattle don't eat that, so they know that it's highly poisonous. So there's a ribosome inactivating protein, so you can imagine that it inactivates the ribosome. I'm not going to talk about the mechanism. Very interesting. All eukaryotic cells, in all eukaryotic cells, it inhibits the protein synthesis completely. So that cells then undergo apoptosis or necrosis. So our idea was to, first of all, actually we started with the idea that we will use the toxin part of the molecule. So so this protein has a lectin and a toxin. They are held together by a disulfide bond, one single disulfide bond. So the lectin is what takes the toxin inside cells. So if you take away the lectin part and you have only the toxic part, but you conjugate the toxin now to a specific protein which would, let's say an antibody to a particular receptor or a ligand to a particular receptor on a cell that you would like to eliminate. So again, that's something that has come to the level of pre-clinics. So we've been able to conjugate this toxin A chain to an antibody and see that only those cells that express the receptors to which the antibody is specific, these cells get killed and the others do not. So that again is something that should take off. I do not know whether they will. So these two are me, but I've had very many collaborations. So I should say the collaborations have helped me a lot in understanding what other people are doing. So, but I will not talk about them presently.
Certainly. I mean, I'm sure you must have had a very diverse kind of experience, and it's really grateful of you that you agreed to talk to people of our audience here.
My pleasure.
And yeah, so since our inaugural edition, we are going to talk about breast cancer.
Yes.
I would like to give you a few insights or opinions you have about how the dynamics of research, diagnostics or treatment in breast cancer in our country holds. So I mean, in your opinion, briefly, could you tell us to what extent or what level breast cancer research has spearheaded in cancer research, in India or globally?
So all the research institutes that work on cancer, actually there are research institutes that are primarily to understand cancer. So there are cancer research institutes.
Yes.
So of course, quite a few groups in those institutes are working on breast cancer, surely. But there are also others like in the University of Science, where people work on diverse subjects. There are few faculty who work on cancer, and in that particular group of cancer researchers, also there are people who are interested in breast cancer. And I am 100% sure that though the research that is going on addresses the reason for why breast cancer has become so at least the incidences seem to be increasing, or I could say that there are more people who are coming and reporting that they have a problem. All that, of course, and treatment also has come a long way since my mother had cancer, breast cancer. She was diagnosed with breast cancer 25 years ago, and she succumbed to that. Since then to now, definitely treatment as such has also increased tremendously, the modalities, and definitely the longevity has also increased. So remission periods have increased. All that for sure has happened, both at the research as well as clinical level. But of course, a lot more needs to be done.
Yes.
Definitely.
So, could you just tell us to what extent the kind of research we are doing? Certainly, it has advanced, but you can't just have a number. But how long a way does it still have to take to come to the clinics for treatment or diagnosis?
So the combination therapies have all stemmed from research, of course.
Yes.
I think any new, so I'm talking about, when I say combination therapies, I'm still talking about drugs. I'm not talking about any other treatment. So the one that I talked about also, this Abrin, which can be conjugated to an antibody. So still it has not come to clinics. It's still, there are, in fact there are clinical trials, not with Abrin, but ricin A chain.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not aware of that in India, however. Okay. But of course, in America, there are large number of clinics that are looking into it.
Okay.
They should take at least maybe a couple of years more for those molecules to come in, because now research is important, of course, because while it sounds very easy that you can target any unwanted cells using a toxin, it sounds very easy, but then there are large number of side effects.
Okay.
So now all these have been addressed with respect to ricin, and what's true of ricin should also be true of Abrin. So whatever the West adopts, in this case I'll say it doesn't matter whether the research is done in the West or in India.
Yes.
But as soon as those are then okayed for use by clinics or for treatment, I think India will be able to adopt immediately. So I don't think it's not the research coming into coming into the clinics definitely is not very far off.
Okay.
Combination.
Okay.
But whether that will, I'm sure that there will be, I'm sure improvement in the modalities for sure. Like if I say that from the time patients are diagnosed with breast cancer and after treatment when they succumb to the disease, if it was, let's say, 5 years, 25 years ago, I'm sure now it is doubled. So I know of several women who were diagnosed and fortunately they are still, I can't say fine, but comfortable even after 10 to 12 years. So I think
that's fantastic.
That's fantastic. So anything else will definitely add, not only to the longevity, but also to the extent of morbidity and discomfort. Sure.
Yeah. So the recent numbers in India, so the number of incidents, or rather the number of reports for breast cancer have been increasing, and also for Indian women, breast cancer is the number one cancer that has been diagnosed. And yet in India there is no centralized breast cancer screening program. So could you comment on that?
So I think, yes, I am sure that should be an important thing to take up because I know it can be done. Because I'll just give I'm digressing from this, but I'll say that recently I heard Professor Ravi from NIMHANS giving an extremely good overview on what they've done in the last 10 years to address encephalitis.
Okay.
And I was really amazed at what can be done. So though they've not come to centralized place in India, which covers 100% of India, but I think whatever they've done in nodal centers all over India caters to a very large number. And I'm sure that they are building upon that to finally get to one, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. I'm sure they will do that, but it's possible. And that was done in the last 10 to 15 years.
Okay.
So I think breast cancer screening, as you say, probably that's something that could be taken up and is doable. Why it hasn't is something I'm not able to understand. But I do know that they've started in some way with having cancer registry. And what was 25 years ago and what information is available now is fantastic. So I think once the cancer registry starts, then I think it's from there that they would take it to the next step of treatment. Screening and treatment. Now, when you say screening, what are you implying? What are you talking about?
So in general, there are other countries, they have screening programs. So they screen for lumps and then they categorize people into if they are metastatic or non-metastatic, or if they are tumorous or not non-tumorous, and then take it forward with every particular patient and then give the respective diagnosis and treatment. So in that way, certainly India has a big population, and I'm sure there will be more reportings if there is a centralized scheme. If not centralized, at least each state should start implementing something. Kidwa is doing amazing work with breast cancer and all the other cancers, following up people, and St. John's Hospital as well. They have their own research institute, and they are following up on people. They have a bottom-up approach, bottom-to-top approach, where they are following up each patient after surgery, and then seeing even after 5 years if there is recurrence of breast cancer or not. So I think that is some way forward, and that is a beginning point for all of us. And I'm sure soon there is some screening program for the entire country.
So when you said screening, you are talking more with respect to those who've already been diagnosed, have had surgery, and they should be screened for recurrence? Or are you saying that all women above 35 should undergo screening?
Yes.
Now, while that appears the right thing to do and perhaps the best model, but I can already see that it's extremely difficult in India. Definitely. Now there are two aspects to that. To have that many centers, because you would need to have, of course, not clinics as such, but at least a paramedic center kind of, where the screening can be done. But to be able to screen everybody, each and every woman who's about 35, is a daunting task. And forget that, it's difficult to get people to go there also. You know, and I'll give my example. I mean, I think this will really probably tell you why you will not get everybody to come on their own. So it's terrible, but I come from a family of cancers, because my mother died of cancer, and one of her sisters, but she didn't die of cancer, but she did have, two of her sisters had cancer. Neither of them died of cancer. So theirs probably was not the invasive type. Now, so three of from my mother's side, and from my father's side, two had breast cancer, my father's sisters, and one had, I think, esophageal cancer.
Okay.
So, in spite of this, so, you know, when all this happened, when my mother passed away, of course it was a very difficult period for us. And so I was advised, and my sister, we are three sisters, and we were advised to go and get the screening done. I went with an open mind, but whatever screening that was available then, which perhaps continues now, I do not know. So this was when I was 40, I think 40 years old. But I went for my first screening, and I never wanted to go back again, because I felt that the anxiety, not before the screening, but the anxiety and whatever I suffered at that time, suffered is not a good word, but because it was finally for something that's going to lead to treatment, if at all. But whatever I experienced was so bad that in my mind I thought that if I have to do this, because you need to go every year, until you're 50 or something, and then you need to go every 6 months. So I thought to myself that if at all there's beginning of any kind of a tumor in me, it will only increase if I go, because it's known and it's been indirectly proven that all these conditions, mental conditions, can also indirectly promote cancer. So I decided I'm not going. I'm 65 now. I'm not saying I'm free of everything, but I'm glad that I didn't go after when I was 40. I would have suffered, and I don't know, maybe I would be ill by now. So looking at this, when I, who's aware, educated and aware, I couldn't bring myself to go. And my family telling me also wouldn't. I think the same thing happened with my sister, my older sister. So I think she went for, I think, at least 3 screenings, and after that she also decided on her own, with no discussion between us, that she would not go. And she is 68. So, well, I'm not saying that, you know, not going is definitely going to help, but I'm not so sure going also will help. That's my feeling.
So you mean to say that the experience should be better when you go for screening, or rather the techniques they use for screening? Technique
that they use. I don't know which other. I'm not a doctor, so I wouldn't know. But the technique that they use need to be different.
Okay.
It can't be what I experience.
Maybe the way forward, or the way where we can start, could be where there is no separate slot for you to go in for a screening, but rather, you know, people go for annual medical checkups. So if we could start incorporating this also as a part of it, probably the psychological tension and anxiety would reduce.
Absolutely. Okay. The other thing also I could say with respect to the screening thing, what I think is more important than just, you know, screening of a population would be awareness. So that's something that I do since then, since 40, you know, when I was 40. You should test yourself whenever you remember. Test yourself to see whether you can feel any difference in your body, and to be able to, you know, get the first I mean, you can check that there is a small lump or whatever, and then don't wait, then you go to the doctor. So that's the approach that I have taken, that self-examination, and then maybe that's the reason why it's been okay so far.
Okay. Since I may call you an immuno-endocrinologist, so do you have any insights, do you have an immunological perspective in terms for breast cancer?
So, immunological perspective, so let me say with respect, most cancers are cells which differ morphologically and at the molecular level, even on the cell surface, from their normal counterpart, definitely. So there would be either one can think in terms of neoantigens that come, or because of mutations, or there could be new antigen, not new, but changed antigens which may also come in terms of, let's say, expression. So let's say on a normal breast cancer cells, you have very small numbers of gonadotropin releasing hormone receptors. They are so less in number that detection with antibodies is, you can't detect. However, in about say 30% of cancers, breast cancers, these GnRH receptors, gonadotropin releasing hormone receptors, they're overexpressed. So it would, of course there are these neoantigens because they are in very small numbers in normal cells. So immune cells should be able to recognize these as well, because the GnRH receptors you have are on the pituitary cells and also the placenta. So as such, it's not ubiquitously present. So it's possible. However, GnRH is not the best example, but what would be a good example would be these growth factor receptors such as HER2/neu. Yeah. So, and of course, as one knows already, that these are exploited for treatment. So you have antibodies that can bind to these receptors, and there's a curtailment of growth. So it's been a success story, but success story only with respect to a very small percentage of.
Yes.
So these antigens which are differentially expressed on breast cancer cells, that still needs to be studied.
The diversity of cancer and breast cancer is, I think, the limiting factor always for diagnosis and treatment in cancer.
But there are some, from the last 25 years, one thing is for sure, that all the clinics that can afford, or let me put it the other way around, that patients who can go to these clinics and to pay for those tests, I know include estrogen receptor positivity, progesterone receptor positivity, and others. So I know that diagnosis and treatment has come a long way. So it makes no sense giving antibodies to HER2/neu to those patients who do not have. So definitely they do the screening.
Yes.
So that way it's, things are much better. But yes, I do believe that immune system has a tremendous role to play, not only breast cancer progression, but also all cancers. Because it is known that, it's believed, there's an immunosurveillance, I think you've read enough about that to know that when there is a mutation and a pro-cancer cell comes into existence, the immune cells actually come, not only the acquired immune cells, but also the innate immune cells. They get activated and they in fact kill these cells. So that's the way I think we all have mutations all the time, and our immune system is in fact able to check even the development and establishment of tumors. Most of the time, it's only when there's some errors that happen, and therefore the cancer establishes itself. So I think immune system plays a great role, but the immune system has not been, or the study has not gone to a level where let's say one can think in terms of customized treatment, like maybe patient A has a particular antigen which on her breast cancer cell, but patient B does not, even though everything else looks the same. So but how does one get to that, which antigen? So it's a Pandora.
So like you mentioned, we're not very far, but almost there to reach from the bedside to bedside for say diagnosis or treatment. So you already mentioned that the kind of experience you have when you go for breast cancer screening should certainly be improved. Do you also see that there needs to be some more changes or some important things that need to be incorporated right now for diagnosis and treatment of breast cancer?
Will you yourself put this idea that breast cancer screening could be a part of the total health management? So once a year when you go for your entire, the testing of your entire body functions, this could be incorporated. Could be incorporated. I do not know how well and how fast that can be done.
Okay.
But I cannot see, other than that, I cannot see. Now improvements, we are only, when we are, so far whatever I've been discussing, in fact I've only been thinking in terms of the urban population and the middle class families who can afford to pay. If this needs to be implemented in the villages, because after all India has many more rural, a good percentage of rural population, and I'm sure that these screenings do not happen there.
Yes.
So I think if you're talking about India, then we should think of the rural population, because there are a large number of amenities and breast cancer centers which are all over the country in the urban areas. But I think I feel we should do much more for the villagers than, because I think they are not even aware.
Yeah.
So starting with awareness will probably improve the management and treatment itself. We need to do that.
So do you think, there are a lot of drugs that are in place for in research and testing. So if there is a fast forward technique for clinical trials, do you think that would become a better kind of an approach to infuse more number of drugs getting into market for treatment? Do you think that would also be a way forward?
So drug testing is something which is, I am also very confused about it. We know for sure that clinical trials are absolutely a must for any drug to come into the market. So the problem with these clinical trials is that you need to have a good number of people who are given only placebo to be able to find out whether there is any effect or not. So morally, I'm not so sure that this is right.
Okay.
I also know that just animal testing will also not be enough.
Yes.
So this is a big question mark, and I've thought about this several times. I've thought about it all the time. In fact, whenever I find out that there are these clinical trials going on, and I was in the RCGM at one time, several years ago. So I used to listen to pharmaceutical companies coming and present their work for all the antibodies that are monoclonal antibodies that are being used for the treatment of cancer. There are a large number of them, and they're very useful as well. So when they were proposing these trials, since from then till now, I feel that though it has to be done, I feel that it's a difficult decision, because it's terrible that 50% of the people are given placebo and the other 50 are given this treatment. But I suppose it has to be done. What to do?
Right.